Hello and welcome to everyone joining us for International Day of Women in Science. Today's career panel is proudly presented by Young Women in Bio, Winward Academy, and the Teens Rise Foundation. I'm Gabby Millan, preferred pronouns she, her, ella, and I'm the Vice President of Impact for Winward Academy.
And I'm Sarah O'Day, pronouns she, her, Senior Director of Medical Affairs Strategy and the National Chair for Young Women in Bio. On today's International Day of Women in Science, we are recognizing 3 incredible women advancing science who shape our world and transform lives. These women inspire middle and high school students, as well as college students, to pursue careers in STEM. It is our absolute pleasure to welcome everyone to today's panel and to learn from these incredible leaders in successful science careers. We'll hear about their journeys and their scientific research.
Before we welcome our guest speakers, we'd like to first share a little bit more about their backgrounds. And to help us introduce our speakers is our student co-moderator, Ayanna Tinsley. Welcome, Ayanna. Ayanna is currently a freshman at the University of Southern California, studying arts, technology, and the business of innovation. She is the author of This Is What an Engineer Looks Like and is pursuing projects to encourage more women into science. We are thrilled to introduce today's panelists. As a reminder, please see the link in the chat to their bios if you want to read a little bit more about them. We'll go ahead and get started. And first we'll have Sarah introduce Dr. Leticia Ferri.
Thank you. Currently the Executive Director of Medical, Cardiovascular Business Development Strategy, Early Assets, and Cross-Therapeutic Areas at Bristol Squibb, Leticia started her career with BMS in 2010 in Brazil. She is now currently working in New Jersey. Leticia's clinical and research training includes an MD from the University of São Francisco in Brazil, a Master's of Science in Pharmacology from Moringa State University in Brazil, a Master's of Clinical Epidemiology from the University of Toronto in Canada, a PhD in Cardiology Genetics from the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, and an MBA from Cornell University.
Also joining us today is Dr. Wendy Clemens. As Vice President of Senior Early Development Oncology at Bristol Myers Squibb, Dr. Wendy Clemens leads a team of scientists who develop novel oncology therapeutics from preclinical stage through proof of concept. With over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, her various scientific roles focused on immunology, infectious disease, and oncology. Dr. Wendy Clemens received her Bachelor's of Science from Penn State University in Animal Bioscience, her Master's of Science from University of Missouri in Veterinary Immunology, and her PhD from the Department of Physiology at Penn State University. Her postdoctoral research fellowship was conducted at the Food and Drug Administration in Bristol, Maryland.
And now lastly joining us today is Abigail Hata. Abby began her journey in science and medicine at a young age, working in a microbiology and immunology lab at OHSU in Portland, Oregon, throughout her high school years. Abby pursued a double major in English literature and pre-medicine at Wheaton College and was fortunate enough to complete most of her literature work during her sophomore year at Oxford University. She completed her master's in medical genetics at Northwestern University to pursue a career in genetic counseling that later led to her moving to an adult pediatric clinic at UC Davis Medical Center. After 15 years, Abby made a career change and joined Shire Pharmaceuticals, working in rare metabolic disease, and now works for Horizon Therapeutics as a regional medical director with a continued focus in rare metabolic disease. As we can see, all have the background, experiences, and careers to provide us with such rich information for today, and we couldn't be more excited to share this time with them.
I'd also like to remind all of you that you'll maximize the benefit of our program by engaging with the conversation and asking questions. So please be sure to submit your questions in the chat at any time during today's talk, so we could ask your questions during the open Q&A that we'll be hosting at the end of this program.
We now like to welcome Leticia to please turn her camera and microphone to join us.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here today with you.
We're so happy to. We have so many questions that we're hoping to cover, so let's just jump right in. So the first question is going to go to you, Leticia. I was wondering if you could please share a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what life was like growing up, and what or who inspired your journey.
Thank you so much. And I always love to think back like about my life and where I grew up. So I think as Sarah mentioned on my introduction, I'm from Brazil. Uh, and just to help you all to picture a little bit, I'm from a very, very small town in Brazil, south of Brazil. So nothing fancy when we think about Brazil, the beaches, nice place. No, no, I'm very countryside, small town. Like probably the most exciting thing that I used to do as a child was go to the church on the weekend where we could see people. And even I was reflecting about the school and the where I attended, like my elementary school or high school. It was very simple. And back then in Brazil, we didn't have much access to science, to labs, but I was always like curious and open to think about what would be next steps. So it was, I would say, very happy childhood and think about where I came from. But it's so amazing to think about where I came from and to see where I am today. And I think that the other question is who inspired me? I always find hard to think to point just one person because I think I always try to keep like a lot of people who inspired me and to have more than one inspiration. But I think what is important to say that I always had a very strong supportive network. So my family, my parents were always there and kind of saying, yes, you can go. And if something doesn't go as expected, we are here to help you. And so probably my biggest inspiration or my cheerleaders were my parents, who were kind of always supporting me to try. And and because I knew if something was wrong, I had where to come back.
Digging a little deeper, when you think about the decisions you made as a young adult that allowed you to be where you are today, what are you most proud of?
I think has been a lot of decisions that I have made along the journey. And I can't think about a single decision like, oh yes, this was the turning point. But in my mind, it has been always be willing to go to the next step. So as I was in high school, yes, I'm willing to take the next step and apply to multiple colleges. And this is one thing I'm going to tell you all, like sometimes you receive a lot of no's and just don't take that personally and like just keep fighting for it until you get what you want. And so that's how I think. So I went to college, so and then I medical school, then always like, okay, what might be a possible next step? Then I did my master's, probably then after the PhD, and I think it has been a natural process. So with that, I think probably if I could summarize all that in one decision, might be always be willing to learn, always be willing to be exposed to what I wasn't so sure if I knew about, and to be uncomfortable of not knowing, and open to always be learning. And so I think as you take out that next step, then you realize suddenly it opened doors, then you can start to think what be a possible next one. And one thing I want to tell if you all, I know like now, even like, even for me, when I heard Sarah reading my bio, I'm like, wow, it's great. But it's when you are on the process and seeing what might be the next university, what you're doing, it's intimidating. And sometimes we're like, oh, am I going to be accepted? How I'm going to do this? And sometimes we're like, or maybe there is a lot of people much smarter and ahead than me. How I'm going to handle that? So it can be intimidating. But please don't let that fear take care. So just keep going and keep doing it, because as soon as you start, you will get to know people who are there and you realize, wow, okay, I can do this. And so just keep trying and always thinking. Maybe so my biggest advice, think about the next step, and then like after it, the other ones will come naturally, and maybe even the next one or the 2 steps after that might be one that you have not even thought about it, because I think the opportunities and the options just start to be very, very open. Sorry, lots of decision points here, Sarah, probably not giving you just one.
No, we appreciate that. And you mentioned the keep fighting beyond the no, the layers of intimidation that comes with wanting to pursue career and your dreams. Do you mind kind of sharing what was the greatest challenge you had to overcome to get where you are today?
So I think there are so many challenges, right, that we all overcame. But for example, I will share one example with you. The first time that I moved abroad, that I went to University of Toronto in Canada. And so first it was like, for me, like I was saying, from a very small town in Brazil, going to a big university in Canada, and you get there, didn't know many people. Of course, English is my second language. And then a lot of things, even the culture, how I was, I learned how to approach professors and all that hierarchy in Brazil is completely different in Canada, where people were just willing to challenge the professors. So all that was all new to me. And the example I want to share with you here, for example, was the English, like for me, English being the second language. And then I enrolled at the university at a course for all students, all the international students. And as soon as I went to that class, the teacher there, she approached all of us and she's like, okay, first of all, I want to tell you all, you are all too old to not have an accent. So just be proud of your accent. And she's like, instead of trying to get rid of your accent, let's just change the perspective. Be proud of your accent. And think about it, that you are here on this university doing this course in your second language. So that just show the value and how much you are bringing to it. So for me, and why I want to share this example, this was kind of a turning point, because something that was a challenge for me and I was seeing as my weakness, when she said that, I started to say, okay, that's my strength. That's my power, because I'm bringing so much background here in the diversity of thought and other ideas that I thought was putting me behind. But I'm like, no. And then she mentions, she's like, just think, when you are talking, a lot of people wish they could speak another language, and here you are. So it was like, and that now I try to bring that to many other situations.
Wow, that's such an amazing response. And then just going into the next question, we were just wondering, is this where you thought you would be when you were in high school?
No, not even high school, not even after medical school or residency. And this is why I'm so passionate about what we are doing this today. Back then, I even didn't have any idea about all these career possibilities, all these pathways. And just to be more concrete with you, I remember the first time I was interviewing for a position in pharma. They called me and I wasn't even sure. I'm like, why do you need me there? What I'm going to do? But somehow I'm like, yeah, sure. Let me talk to you. And looks like I did well on the interview. I had no idea about corporate interviews, things that they were going to ask me, but I think I was curious enough and just to start to think about it. And even now, like I think so on high school, I have no idea I would be here. So I think all the way, and even now sometimes, to be honest with you, when people think like, where you want to be in 5 years, I'm like, I don't know, but I want to be where I bring value, where I am excited, where I'm learning, and where I'm contributing. So I think up to now, I keep that options open and just to think what is the next exciting thing, and not to have a very fixed path, but really no idea at all that I would be here.
Thank you, Leticia. You talked a lot about embracing what we have to bring to the table. our language, our accent, and how beautiful all that is in the contribution of what we want to do. So do you mind kind of sharing, why does diversity matter in science?
Yes, and I think in just talking about science, I think more than ever now that we are all here on this pandemic, we just can see how important is science, and how we needed to move science and bring science as quick as possible. But when we think about science, what is science? Is try and error. We needed to make hypotheses, keep bringing experiments, and we need that collaboration. And the collaboration is really, we need to bring a lot of people. So I think as more diverse we are on this problem solving, people think in different ways, different backgrounds, all kind of, that's important, because if a team that's doing one experiment, everyone thinks the same time, the first time it fails, we're like, okay, we don't know what else to do now. But if you have that diverse of thought, that's when you keep trying, and then it would be someone coming and say, okay, let's try this way. What about this different approach? And I think that's the beauty. So I think science in this problem solving is just a perfect example on how it's important to have all that diverse of thoughts. And one thing I just want to tell you all, at the same time I'm saying that, I know like sometimes in practical ways, sometimes it's not easy for you to be the one raising your hand and say, okay, why are we doing that way? Why we didn't try that way if others are all agreeing? But please, that's one thing I'm going to say, like if you think it should be done something in a different way, always raise your hand, or if you don't understand, raise your hand and ask the questions. Most of time there are others that are there and might be thinking different ways and they don't have the courage to be the first one. So please, let's, like you're saying, Gabby, embrace the diversity, embrace who we are, and if you have questions, just bring it. But I think science is beautiful, how the value is quite evident, and how much we need that diversity of thought.
Thank you, Leticia, so much for these incredible insights. I've learned so much and definitely agree with everything you've said. If you could stay with us, we'll be back for a joint Q&A session at the end of the panel.
Now we're going to welcome Dr. Wendy to join us so we can learn about her career journey. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure to be here today. It's an honor and a thrill. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Let's go ahead and dive in. Now, Wendy, can you please describe what your job at Bristol Myers Squibb involves, and what is your favorite part about your job?
Yes, it's a very cool job I have at Bristol Myers Squibb, which is a big pharmaceutical company that Leticia and I both work at. I actually develop drugs for cancer patients, and that is really it's a very powerful thing to be able to do that, to be able to help patients that are very sick. Basically, the word develop, what aspect of that do? I basically try to see how the drug works, and then I make sure that the drug is getting to the right patients at the right time and in a safe way. And I do that very early on. So this is, I'm actually involved in the clinical trials the first time that they put these drugs into humans and patients. And so it's a really critical stage of drug development where you're learning. You have no idea how it's going to turn out. You have all these predictions, but you don't exactly know how the drug's going to work. And it's our job to figure that out, to make sure that it actually is benefiting these cancer patients. I think that one of the challenges that I think I have is that it is, in fact, treating patients that are really sick. I think that working with cancer patients, at least in the stages of disease that they are very sick. And it is difficult to have to work with patients that sometimes actually succumb to their disease. So there are a lot of challenges when you're working in that situation, and you're sort of at the end of the road for a lot of these patients, which is just heartbreaking. But if you flip that, it's also the most rewarding as well, because we are there in a very vulnerable time of their lives where we can actually make a difference in their life. And that's actually something that inspires me as well. So it's really challenging, but it can be also very inspirational as well.
And Wendy, what does a typical day look like for you at BMS?
Yeah, a typical day. A lot of juggling. I'm not sure if anybody else can relate to that. I work with a large portfolio of drugs, about over a dozen different drugs that are in various stages of clinical trials. And I work with a team of a lot of different kinds of scientists, scientists that all specialize in a different area. And so it's a lot of juggling, and sometimes I think it's a lot of orchestrating. I kind of compare myself to being like a conductor in an orchestra. You have your violin section, your horn section. These are all the experts that I work with on a daily basis. And I try to make sure that everybody's playing the same tune and they're all on time and they're all aligned, which we use that term a lot, which means they're all in agreement, and that we're all marching towards sort of this final outcome, which is, again, delivering these drugs to cancer patients. So it's a lot of talking, a lot of reading, a lot of studying. But yeah, I often compare it to sort of having the conductor of an orchestra, making sure everything and everybody is on the same page and in agreement. Doesn't always happen, but we try.
I love that orchestra analogy. So on to our next question. What advice do you have for girls who are interested in science careers, or like what challenges might they face once they delve into this?
Yeah, I think that, Leticia hit on this as well. I think, being curious is probably my number one thing. You have to constantly, as a scientist, as somebody that likes the science field, you're automatically kind of curious about things. How does this work? Or what makes that? Or how does this run? I think that that's something that you have to constantly be tapping into, asking questions, being curious. I think being persistent is another one, and this is one Leticia hit on. You're always sort of, the doors are always kind of closing in front of you, both scientifically, both personally, professionally. You have to be persistent and try to keep actually knocking down those doors, or finding creative ways around them, open windows, or some creative way out of difficult situations. So persistence is just huge. And I think a lot of humility goes a long way, being humble, making sure that, what you're doing. I think that it's a lot related to being curious, because if you act like you know everything, then you can't really be curious about anything. And so having some bit of humility. Science is really complicated. We're never going to know anything, but hopefully in one given day, you kind of are able to answer one question, and being really happy about just answering that one question in one day. So I think, being curious, being persistent, and being humble, I think are a lot of things that I think about. There was a second part to your question, I think.
Yeah, I was just kind of going a little bit into what challenges might they face.
Yeah, challenges, I think a lot of us, when we sit in high school, or we sit and we think about who we're going to be when we grow up, I think we think it's like an easy path, right? It's like a straight line, and I'm just supposed to figure out what that line is and just go. And I guess the most thing I'd like to communicate is that it's not a straight line. It's actually like a spaghetti that just kind of circles around and bends and turns and goes up and down. Like, there is no straight line. There is no right path. So, I think that being persistent and understanding that it's not all clear on any given day, and the path isn't clear. Just like Leticia said, she didn't know what she was going to be when she grew up. Neither did I. I wanted to be a vet, and here I am sitting at a pharmaceutical company. And I don't know where I'm going to be 5 years from now. I kind of know where I'm going to be 5 days from now. But I think, yeah, just don't think it's a straight line, because it's not. It's actually it's unique, and it's probably unique to every individual person.
Wendy, many of us have been impacted in some shape or form with cancer. So thank you for all the work that you do. Do you mind kind of, with that little nugget of information, going into a little bit more depth of why your job is important and what difference does it make to our community and to you personally?
Yeah, definitely. I think just to go into a little bit more detail about what the type of drugs I work on is, I work on drugs that actually, they're not there to kill cancer cells specifically. They're there to actually activate your immune system to kill the cancer cells themselves. And that's a field called immunotherapy. The part about my job I love the most is that I wasn't an oncologist. I never studied cancer. I actually studied the immune system. I studied immunology, and that's why my experience was in infectious disease. It was an autoimmune disease. When they first asked me to come to work in cancer, I was like, I'm not an oncologist. I can't do that. But I studied the immune system, and that was the key, right? So what I love about what I do is that I get to study the immune system every day. It's something that I think it's very fascinating. And I think having the ability of a cancer patient to use their own body, their own cells, and activate those cells to kill cancer, I think it's magical and beautiful. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I do love working in cancer. I never thought I would, and here I am. And I do think that those patients, you're right, Gabby. I think we've all been touched by cancer. And I think that the ability to prolong a cancer patient's life, like that's just, I don't think that you could do anything more important than that.
Thanks, Wendy. I know as we're celebrating International Day of Women and Girls in Science, one final question for you before we end this session. Could you share why increasing female presence in science is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I cut out for a minute, but I'm back. But yeah, I think the diversity is huge. I think, as I mentioned before, I wasn't a trained oncologist, and so I was an immunologist with a different opinion, walking into a room of MDs and oncologists, and I kept saying, well, what am I going to say? These guys have been studying this their whole life. What am I going to add? But in fact, I had a different perspective. I had a different background. I had different opinions, and my opinions they should be valued. They were valued because they were different. And at the end of the day, differing opinions make for better research, better medicines, and better impact in the world. And so diversity is of utmost importance if you want to be successful. Whether it's ethnic diversity, whether it's female, male, whether it's oncology or immunology, diversity strengthens everything that we do. And so it is really important to me to make sure all voices, actually that I have a lot of diverse voices at the table, and that all of those diverse voices are heard. At the end of the day, that is a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Thank you, Abby. We'll be back for the joint Q&A session in just a bit. And now we'd like to join Abby to share her stories.
Hi, thanks for having me here today. Excited to be here.
Welcome, Abby. All right, so Abby, if you don't mind sharing, what or who inspired you to pursue science?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I have loved this opportunity to reflect on kind of the career, and I focus my bio actually really on my younger years, because as everybody's talked about, Wendy and Leticia both talked about, again, I echo the same sentiment. I am in a role I could have never imagined back when I was in junior high thinking about my life. And I was kind of an unusual child. Like, I thought very early, and I was very convinced early, I wanted to be a neonatologist. I'm not sure where I came up with that. So I wanted to work in the NICU with newborn babies. That's what I wanted to do. I was very focused. And then life happened, right? And I was very lucky early on to have some opportunities of people in my life who were in science, some acquaintances. I got to work in a lab, which was great. Also taught me that perhaps that's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, but I learned a lot. And then I stumbled upon some things that were unexpected. I found out about genetics and the kind of changing landscape. This was more than 20 years ago, and genetics was really different then, but I was really intrigued, and I thought, gosh, maybe this is something that I would want to explore. And so I started asking questions kind of similar to Wendy and Leticia. And, I think what was tricky is that I knew I wanted to be in science, but I also wanted to explore other things in life too. And so I was trying to decide, in college, what I wanted at 30, at 40, down the road. And that's a hard thing to think about at that age. But I thought, gosh, I really want to be in a career that challenges me, that is dynamic, where I'm learning every day, where it's changing. And so I found out about genetics, and I found out about this really tiny area of genetics called genetic counseling. It was really new. Weren't very many people doing it. Were very few programs. And I thought, this could be it. So long story short, it's the road that kind of led me to my initial career in genetic counseling. It's not where I thought I would be. I thought I'd be in medical school. I thought I'd be a neonatologist. But I ended up in graduate school in medical genetics, and it's brought me down a very circuitous road, not the road I expected, but one that I'm really grateful for. And again, right today, I am not a genetic counselor, practicing genetic counselor. Like many others, I took on new opportunities. I was, offered kind of additional opportunities that I said yes to, that I said, hey, maybe I'll try this. It might work, it might not. And it led me down a road of being able to be in industry now and working on a medical team in an area I never thought I would be in. So long story short, that's kind of where it went.
The theme of curiosity keeps coming up, I see.
It does.
Yeah, as well as the circuitous path to where we are today. I think everyone can agree that none of us, or not all of us, are doing what we thought we would be doing when we were 16. Abby, as we think about increasing the female voice, the woman's voice in science, what are some of the challenges that women tend to or may face in careers in science?
This is actually a really interesting question, given my initial entry into genetics. So what's interesting is that genetic counseling was a newer field, and it was actually primarily women, which was interesting. I think initially, it was very small, and I think the psychosocial aspect and the counseling aspect, it just was a very female-driven profession, embedding itself into a larger medical community that was different than that, right? And it was an interesting dynamic. And now the profession has become more diverse. But I think what's been interesting is through that process of being in an unusually female-oriented profession, entering the science world, it's brought up some interesting questions about where do you go from here, right? What is kind of your role in the bigger picture? What is that kind of glass ceiling that you may have that others may not have, and specifically to a larger profession? And so that's actually brought up some really interesting things. I think I've struggled with knowing how to break through that glass ceiling that was really there, I felt, for a profession that, was primarily female, and what that looked like, and how to advocate for our role, to expand it, to create other opportunities. And so what I'm very grateful for is that, as I've moved on past traditional clinical genetic counseling, which I did for many years, looking for opportunities to say, what, my skill set, what I've learned, what I have to offer is unique. I am capable of doing things that maybe aren't in the job description traditionally, but I am capable, and let me show you how I'm capable, and letting your work stand kind of, for you, and being willing to take that risk. Again, I'm in a job where normally they would not hire somebody with my credentials, but because of my clinical years of experience, my involvement in clinical trials, my depth of relationships and experience, I had opportunities that were given to me. So I think that that's a unique challenge as females go into science, is to kind of push back on some of those limitations that have historically been put there and say, what, I am if I want, I'm going to go for it, and I will let my work stand for kind of who I am.
Wow, just incredibly inspiring. And then my question is, what would you do differently if you were to start over at our age?
Oh, you know, that's an interesting question. I'm really grateful for where I am today. Incredibly grateful. One of the things that I think that I would do, and I did this a little bit, but I would do it even more. Early on, somewhere along the way, somebody told me, you know, you're going to spend the rest of your life, you know, if you want to pursue science, you're going to have your chance to do science, but also balance it with other things you love. And at that time, when I was, you know, trying to be the best applicant for medical school, that's what I thought I wanted to do, somebody had said, well, you know, medical school is like well-rounded people, right? And I loved so many things. I played music, I loved literature, not for a career, but I loved to read, and I loved it. So I thought, gosh, why don't I do, you know, I could be an English lit major and pre-med, right? And I'm not planning to teach or do anything with literature, but why not take the opportunity to learn and expand my knowledge? And so I would encourage everybody to think about, you know, taking time, right? You can really focus in on kind of, you know, where you think your career is going to go, or what you need to learn for your career. But at the same time, make sure you're exploring all aspects of life that you love. I wish that I had taken even more opportunities to, you know, learn about other things that weren't maybe directly relevant to where I thought I was going, but just to, well, you know, round out kind of your just appreciation for the world around you, for other people. I think that I would have taken a little bit more time. I was pretty hyper focused. So that's something that, you know, I encourage my kids even to think about, right? Like, think about what you love, your passions outside of just kind of, you know, the where you think it's going to go for a job.
Thank you, Abby. Considering everything that you had to balance to get where you're at right now, up to the point where you're at, what are you most proud of?
This is going to be kind of unique. You know, I'm going to be really honest. I had a really hard time making the decision not to go to medical school. It was actually it was a very hard decision, whether I was going to grad school or medical school, and one that I struggled with for a long time. And, you know, it's one of those things that it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to know what your 20-year-old self is going to want in 10 years, 20 years, or your 15-year-old self, or your, you know, at whatever age. And so I think, you know, there's going to be hard challenges where you're going to have to say yes to something and no to something else. That's just life. I think one of those things that I'm proud of is that, you know, I took a risk. In my mind at that time. It was a big risk, right? I was giving up essentially a dream I had had for a long time to replace it with another dream that I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And I think, you know, I think one of the things is, you know, when you come to those points in your life where all, you know, Wendy talked about this, Leticia, where you have to make decisions, right, that impact your career. I had to make a decision about leaving academia to go to industry. I didn't know if it was the right decision. Right? I think those are the times where you have to kind of look within yourself, trust your gut, also listen to the voices around you that you trust, right? And the people who are in different areas who know you, who, you know, kind of know your passion and your drive, and then really go inside yourself and kind of make the best decision you can be, right, or can make. And, you know, I think that was a thing, is there were hard decisions that had to be made. And again, you make the best decision you can make at the time, and go from there. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges and kind of things that I, you know, sometimes even think back on and just say, you know, that wasn't easy, but I made a decision, and I'm grateful for where I am.
Thank you for sharing that, Abby. I think, you know, as we've all said so far, there's circuitous paths to where we get to, and definitely sounds like you had the same and made the right decision for yourself in the end. What advice would you give someone interested in pursuing a career like yours?
So first of all, I would highly recommend to anyone, I'm going to give a pitch here for rare disease. I work in the field of rare disease, and rare disease, when you think about it, you know, the individuals with rare disease may not ever meet somebody else with their same disease. It's incredibly isolating. They feel alone. They go to the hospital, they go to their physician, and their doctor may not even know about their disease. How isolating is that? But when you put together everybody who has rare disease, which there's more than around 7,000 rare diseases that we know of, they're actually pretty common. So here's my pitch. Highly recommend thinking about rare disease. But what I would think about, if you love to learn, if you're curious, as all of us on this panel were, I think what's exciting is, when I came out of graduate school in genetics, there were really no therapies for genetic diseases. You would diagnose it and you would manage, and they were sad, life-threatening diseases with really hard kind of roads for these patients. And right now I'm actually at a conference right now for emerging therapies, and the landscape has changed. Now we're moving into an era of therapies, of gene therapy. It's just exciting. So for someone like myself, or for students listening, like if you are curious, you want to make a difference, it's an exciting area where you can actually make a tangible difference in the lives of people who have previously felt isolated and alone, which is exciting. So that's my pitch.
Thank you, Abby, for these wonderful insights. At this time, would like to welcome back Leticia and Wendy for a group Q&A to address questions that we have coming in from our audience.
Awesome. So welcome to the joint Q&A now. And I'll start off. And this first question actually goes towards Leticia, because a student read your bio and is actually really interested in hearing a lot more about your role leading the Organization for Latino Achievement. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what do you do there, or just any more info that you'd like to share with us about that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for asking that. And I think so a couple of things before I talk about that role, because I think when I took that position, a lot of people were like, what are you doing? What are you going to do? So I just want to put that out there, because sometimes you can see the value, something that you want to do, and you think it's important, and others might not be having the vision that you're having. So I was at BMS, I was the lead for OLA. That's how we call a people and business resource group. And I was the lead for OLA for 2 years. And what we do that is really to encourage diversity and inclusion at the company for our workforce, but as well, we start to look like what else we can do to help patients, communities, and somehow it's really important. And as well, like what we were doing on OLA for a while as well, there was a lot of programs as well with STEM, exactly like what you're doing here, how we can make sure we talk to the schools and we provide examples or role models, and really to start to inspire and just to show all the possibilities. So OLA is one of the organizations at the BMS. So we have 8 other groups. OLA was for the Latino, but we have a group for women, we have BOLD, we have PEN for Asian. So we have 8 different groups, and we all work in coordination, but we really think it's important to make sure everyone and all those voices get heard, and that we have all those initiatives. So I was previous to this role that I am now, I was the lead for OLA for 2 years.
Thank you. And Wendy, I know you're part of the STEM Council at BMS. Could you speak a little bit about what it is that organization does and how schools may be able to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, similar to Leticia, I think we're both really proud to work for a company that puts so much value on diversity and for education of the next generation of scientists. So I'm I'm a co-lead for the STEM Council, which is in charge of actually bringing together all of the employees at BMS who are volunteering their time and creating opportunity for, like I said, the next generation of scientists within their communities. And what we do is we help to have outreach. BMS is a global company. I think I saw in the chat, somebody said 30,000 people. It's huge. It's a huge company, and it's spread all across the world. So what we do is we encourage our employees to reach out within their communities and to be able to either mentor, to volunteer time, to do conversations like this for certain career panels, where we can try to help, motivate and maybe inspire that next generation, whether or not they come to BMS or not. It doesn't matter, as long as we're getting more scientists into the ecosystem. That's what we want to do. And so we actually organize those activities within Bristol Myers Squibb. So it's very exciting. And I just started, so I'm kind of still a rookie, but I'm learning.
So this question is for Abby, Wendy, and Leticia. What resources are available for our students to gain a network for young females aspiring to get into science careers?
So I'll mention something that I was involved with this last summer. There was a program out of the Bay Area, actually, called Next Gen Girls. And this was an opportunity for high school students to do an internship with somebody working in the science field. And I was able to have a student that worked with me. And because it was virtual this year, because of the pandemic, it opened up some opportunities. And I know that there are programs like this around the country, and in different areas as well. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested, look for an opportunity like this, whether it's locally in your community or something maybe virtual that might be offered. It was great. I learned so much through it, and was so impressed with the student that I was worked with and her just desire to learn. So encourage students to look for things like that.
Yeah, maybe I'll go next. I again, reaching out into your local community is huge. So I live in the Philadelphia area, and so what I have done through the STEM Council, but also by myself, is to reach out to the local universities to see if there are interest in having scientist mentors. Are there people that need to have career advice, resume building, just a simple Q&A. So, but I actually do that via our local universities and our sort of our scientific institutions within the Philadelphia area. They're especially good at reaching out and getting the students in unrepresented areas to make sure that I'm tapping into the right people. So I encourage you to look in your local community to those scientific institutions, and there's probably people like Leticia and I kind of walking around trying to help out.
Yeah. And just to add up to that, I was going to say the same, like just reach out and make a list of names. And as we were saying before, like some people might respond, but send emails and reach out, and just say what you are looking for, which kind of help. And you might be surprised that people will get back to you and will offer help. And if I can just share one example here, this happened to me going back when I went to Canada. I sent a note to, he was the head of the endocrinology department there. Big person, big name. And I sent him an email just saying that I was moving there. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I'm like, okay, what I have to lose? And he answered to me and he met me to have coffee. And after he became a big person and after he was sending email, making introductions. So do you know what? Just reach out, and that's why I want just to share this example, because sometimes you don't know, and so just try and just start to make a list of who might be the possible people that you could reach out, and just keep that list handy, and yeah, and don't be shy.
Awesome. So that amazing responses all around. And then so I will ask the next question. And a student was actually wondering, what would be your guys' advice for gaining lab or internship or even shadowing opportunities in high school, especially with COVID? Options are very limited and it's difficult to find ways to get involved. So how would you guys navigate this?
Yeah, I mean, I can comment from the Philadelphia area. One of those programs that I work in is at Drexel University. And in the summers, they have 1 week courses, just 1 week lab bench research courses. So it's not a lot of time. You don't have to dedicate your whole summer, but it is 1 week hands-on. It's with the School of Biomedical Engineering, and they take all ages in high school, and I even believe a little bit before high school. So again, looking at those local, they might be big names to you and you think like, well, why would Drexel want to do anything with me, or why this big school would want, they do. They want to bring in new talent. They want to recruit people that are interested in the STEM majors. So definitely be bold, reach out, and there are some really nice lab-based exercises and opportunities that are out there.
All right.
Abby and Leticia, anything else you would like to add related to that?
Right. So I did that exact thing when I was, young, and I wanted to work in a lab, and I reached out to my local institution, which was Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. And I didn't know what I wanted to do because I didn't know what the options were, but I reached out and said, hey, is there, opportunity for me to come and just shadow? And it started out with a shadowing, and then they said, oh, maybe we can teach you a few basic lab techniques. And so I said yes to that. And then it turned into a job, and I kept developing skills and got to do all sorts of techniques. And, and I think that that's the thing is like Leticia said, it seems intimidating. You don't know who to reach out to, and some people won't respond, of course, but I would encourage you to look at where you're living and kind of the area you're in, the institutions, and just send an email. I think I am always impressed personally when somebody takes the initiative and is brave to put themselves out there. And I think you'd be surprised at the responses, and it might turn into something, a great opportunity. You never know.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think networking is something that we all here we need to do more of. And in high school, highly recommend start networking, start learning what an informational interview is, meet with somebody for 20 minutes, ask them about what they do. People like to talk. We want to help you. Don't be afraid to reach out. That would be my biggest piece of advice. And, I had the opportunity to work with Next Gene Girls as well last year, and it's an amazing program. So, and I know a lot of different pharmaceutical companies across the country do things similar for high school students. So as everybody has said, reach out, go to Young Women in Bio, go to our website. I believe it's put in the chat, and you can learn more about the events that we hold to inspire and encourage young people to pursue careers in STEM. We have a program called the Young Women in Bio Ambassador Program, where we bring in young people across the country to do a year-long ambassadorship with us, where they work directly with our chapters. So definitely take a look if you're interested. And with that, I think we will go ahead and wrap up today. We have been so inspired by everything we've heard. We focused a lot of our conversation on what it takes for those who want to pursue a career in science, the importance of diversity in science careers, and then the personal journeys of our panelists. And we thank you all for joining us.
We couldn't be more appreciative to all of you for joining us today. We hope this discussion inspired you all to think differently about possibilities for careers in science. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for being part of today's discussion.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.